Good morning, my dear students. Today we are discussing about the subphylum Cephalochordata. In the last class we have discussed about the example of Cephalochordata, that is Amphioxus. So in the last class we have seen the morphological characteristics of Amphioxus. Today we are going to learn about the structure of pharynx. So, Amphioxus is a transparent fish-like animal occurring near the shore. So, it seems to be burrowing in the rocks and they are commonly known as lancelets for the shape of their body. The pharynx, that is supported by gill rods which bordered with numerous gill slits. Coming to the structure of the pharynx, the mouth is situated at the base of the vestibule, which is overarched by a median ventral oral hood containing tentacle-like structure called buccal cirri. So in this picture you can clearly make out the oral hood, and that exactly you can see the presence of the tentacle-like structure, and next to that you can see the presence of the mouth. So this oral hood contains a complex set of ciliated tract, that what we call it as wheel organ. So this mouth is surrounded by a membrane called phylum and is fringed by 12 velar tentacles, and that will leads to the next structure, what we call it as the pharynx. So the mouth which is leading to the next structure, what we call it as the pharynx, and now we are studying with the structure of pharynx. So this is exactly the structure of a pharynx in case of Amphioxus. The pharynx is a highly compressed chamber and occupies anterior half of the body, that is half of the body. So here the walls of the pharynx, they are perforated by nearly 200 oblique vertical slits, that what we call it as the gill slits or branchial apertures. The portions of the pharyngeal wall separating the clefts are known as branchial lamellae. So the gill clefts are vertical slits that get divided into two. So here you can see the gill slits. Between the gill clefts, the wall of the pharynx, they forms the gill bars. So in this picture you can clearly see that is the division, and also you can see the presence of two gill bars, that is primary gill bar and the secondary gill bar. So this pharynx consists of numerous pharyngeal bars with pharyngeal slits between them. The gill bar are of two types, that is a primary gill bar and secondary gill bar. This primary gill bar, so in this picture you can see A, that is primary gill bar, which arises from the tissue which is between two successive gill clefts or the slits, whereas secondary gill bar which arises within the gill clefts as an outgrowth of the dorsal wall and also called as tongue bars. Primary gill bar, internally these gill bars, they have gill rods, supporting gill rods that are gelatinous, a coelomic canal and 3 blood vessels. The ends of the primary gill bar are forked. You can see there. When you come for the secondary gill bar, internally these gill bars have gill rods two blood vessels and no coelomic canal you can find in case of secondary gill bar. The end of the secondary gill bar are simple and they are unforked. These are a difference between primary gill bar and the secondary gill bar. So these bars, they get divided, the gill clefts, into two vertically. So the transverse junctions, they are called as synapticula, which connect both primary bars to each other. See this, the arrangement of the primary, secondary gill bar and the gill clefts and synapticula make the pharynx, which appears like a basket. So the gill bars, they are covered by ciliated epithelium. You can see in this picture. The pharyngeal epithelium that bears cilia, which are long, forming the frontal cilia. First, you can see at the topmost frontal cilia, which help in sweeping the mucus forward. That will allow the mucus to get into. And second, you can see the lateral cilia all over the gill bars, which helps in propelling of the water. So the longitudinal groove, that is the epipharyngeal or hyperpharyngeal groove, so that will be lined with cilia, is present on the dorsal surface of the pharynx. The pair of lateral grooves, the peripharyngeal bands, encircles the mouth at the anterior end of the endostyle. They meet dorsally and join with the epipharyngeal groove. So here you can see the where exactly epipharyngeal groove it is present. On the ventral wall of the pharynx is the longitudinal groove, that what we call it as the endostyle. So the groove is composed of 4 tracts of mucus glands, and these get separated by each other by ciliated cells. The ciliated tracts, these bear cilia that help in sweeping the mucus. The 2 gelatinous skeletal plates supports the endostyle. The pharynx ends posteriorly into esophagus, and it is followed with, that is, the next structure, that is intestine. So the pharynx, which leads into the next structure, what we call it as the narrow intestine. This is about the structure of pharynx. So next comes the feeding mechanism in case of bronchiostoma or amphioxus. Amphioxus is a filter feeder. It will strains its food from the seawater. It feeds on microorganisms like protozoans, diatoms and planktonic forms. Water enters the mouth with the help of the oral cirri get from a sieve in front of mouth. Cilia of the wheel organ and the pharyngeal wall maintains a continuous flow of water which enter the pharynx through the mouth and passes to the exterior through the gill slits, atrium and the arteriopore. These gill clefts, they are highly vascular and there is a gaseous exchange takes place. Minute organic particles, chiefly microscopic organisms, are brought into the pharynx by the water current. During feeding, a continuous stream of water enters the pharynx through the mouth and passes to the atrium through the pharyngeal slits, from where it gets expelled out through the arteriopore. The cilia oriented along the anterior and posterior faces of each gill lamellae, known as lateral cilia, work in unison with the cilia distributed over the pharyngeal surface of the gill lamellae known as the frontal cilia, and thus form an efficient ciliary feeding machine, and such as the branchiostoma, it is known as ciliary feeder. The food cord that enters the esophagus that will be pushed into the midgut through ciliary action. Digestive glands and enzyme digest the food partly, and end products of digestion they are absorbed with the help of blood vessels, and the waste gets out by the anus. During the process of filtering of food, the sand settles on the oral and the velar tentacles. A reverse current of water that will clears the sand particles which are present on the oral and the velar tentacles. The atriopore is closed, the transverse muscles of the atrium contract, the pharynx gets compressed, and the atrial floor is raised. So once it has been done, the water inside the pharynx is forced out. The oral and the velar tentacles diverge outwards to get rid of the sand particles. So this is about the feeding mechanism what you find in the amphixis. Thank you.